And if I jump to Photoshop, so here we've got a piece of marbling that we've done. If I go to the magic wand tool and click on that, at the moment the tolerance is about 32. So if I click on an area down here and I use the shift key, and I can go through and I can select some of these lighter areas, and it will start to mask them out. So now with the selection, I'll just unlock it. I can click the mask. You can see that I've got it the wrong way around. It selected this piece. So I can just click on the mask and go Command I, which is invert. Now if I make a new layer and I pop a gradient behind, drag that layer underneath, then we're going to see what the mask has done. Now with this technique, usually with the magic wand, quite often you'll end up with like a white halo around the edge. In this case, if I click on the mask, I can go to filter, and under other there's a couple of options, maximum and minimum. And you'll see from this, if I click on it, that the higher the radius, the more it kind of eats into that selection. So if I take it down to 1, you can see it pop out. So it's kind of taken that white halo off. If I put it on 2, it eats in a bit further, and that's probably all I need. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump it up a bit, because I quite like the effect that it's having overall. Now the other thing is, if I enlarge up on this, you can see that it starts to square off this technique. So if I'm on the mask, I can actually go up and go filter, filter gallery, and there'll be an option that comes up in here that's called stamp, and actually it's already on it. So if I switch it off, you can see the kind of squareness, and putting a bit of stamp on gives it this kind of organic quality. So I go OK, and you can see it just kind of smooths out those edges. The other thing that's nice here is that if I unlock those two, I can actually now, with the mask selected, move it. It moves independently of this image, and I like some of the things that are happening as this gets dragged around. The way you get these kind of odd little incidentals. So this is fundamentally using it this way, but I'll show you another option. I'll just get this, and I'm just going to delete the mask. No, don't want to apply it. Delete. So I have this. So you can also select in a number of ways, and one of them is color range. So if I come in here, I can click down here, I can get the plus, and I can either click on this image and add to it, or I can even click in here and add to it that way. If I go OK, I've got my selection here, and under select there's a couple more options. There's grow, where it will kind of extend that selection out a wee bit, and there's another one similar where it goes through the whole image, and it finds the areas that are similar to what I selected. Hit the quick mask, and again there's my mask. Command I if I want to flip it around. So this is essentially playing around with how you can get a selection with the magic wand tool. The other thing that's nice about this as well is that it's a good way to kind of eat into an image and get negative space by playing around with the tolerance that you get here, lowering it or raising it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at channels, isolating marks and textures. So with this, I have a map, and this map here, you can see that if I knock the color out of it, it's going to be a good one to reduce to black and white. So if I select all, I can cut it or copy it. I don't need it anymore. And now in here, I'll go directly to the channels. I make a new channel. I usually start off with white. I can see white's the background color, so Command Delete fills with the background color. Command V will paste that map on, and in this case I'll go Command T and stretch it. Make it a little bit bigger. It seems good. Now I want to get rid of this grey out of the background, so I'm just going to go Command L. I can see here that with the white, if I pull that back, it's basically knocked it all out, all that grey. Bring in a bit of black just to sharpen up these, and I don't think I need to do anymore. I don't need to do any dodging or burning, anything like that. So I'll go OK. Command I to invert it lets me have another look at that selection. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill that whole thing in with black. So now I've got this, I can load it up, load it, back into my layers. I can make a new layer, and at this stage I'm going to fill it with black. So I'll just go Option Delete, which fills with the foreground color, and I can see my map over the top. If I go in and have a closer look, we can see it over the image. Now the thing here is if I add a mask, I'll go Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal All, just gives me a nice blank one. I can get the paintbrush tool, and because it's black, black's going to block out. So let's say I don't want this thing here, I can just paint over it. Don't want some of the words, I can paint over it, paint out some of these awkward little areas that are running down the side. Now the other thing is I can still use this mask underneath. So if I go hold down the command, see the icon changes when I'm over the mask, and I click it, I get the selection for this. So now if I come up to my map, I still have the selection from this layer, layer 0. If I paint, you can see it's actually going to paint out everything that's over those land masses. At the same time, so this one here I've kind of left there. At the same time, I can go Command Shift I, which just gives me the opposite, the inverse, but of the selection. And that means now that I'm out here, I can make a smaller brush, and I might say, okay, I'm just going to take out some of that map. So I'll let that settle there, and take out some of these bits. So you can start to play around with it. For me, this bit looks a bit messy, so I'm going to take that out. Up to where the lines kind of join a bit, and there we go. This bit here, if it's a bit messy, like that, just take that out. And this area here, this text, I'm going to knock that bit out as well. So you get a lot of control with this technique, just between inversing. I can take things off the land or take things out of the water. So again, this area here, I can just clean all this out. It's still over the land, and get rid of a lot of this detail that's in here. keep it on the land, but knock it out over the sea a wee bit. Keep some of the details and take some of them away. So I just get a lot of Control Command D, and I'm just going to leave it like that. So getting things going in front and other things that are coming behind. Now, one of the other options I've got here is this graffiti. So I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to isolate the graffiti. So go Command A, I'll select all of this. I'll copy or cut it. I need to save it. And now when I come in here, I'll go to the channels. I'll make a new channel. Command delete. Just to fill it with white, and then I paste it again. And again here I'm going to just enlarge it up a wee bit more. Control D, and now I'm going to go Control L, and I'm going to see how much I can lighten it off. So you can see if I go too far, it's a bit harsh on the text. So I'm going to pull it in a bit, darken it up, and then I'm going to see how much of this I can take out by using dodge and burn. So I go OK, large up on this a bit, because really I'm just focusing around the text. If I use dodge, always have it on highlights. 5% is quite low at the moment, so we'll see. Oh, it's still having an effect. Make the brush a bit bigger, and come in here, dragging over it, and seeing how much I can rub away of that kind of soft grey in the background, but still keeping a bit of detail. So in here, some bits may need a bit more work than others, but it's a good way. I'm just going to make this brush a bit bigger to quicken this up a wee bit. So that I can still come in with the burn, having that on shadows, and try and darken a bit of this up if I think it's getting a bit lost. It's okay, I'm just going to go with that. Now I'll get white with my paintbrush, and I'll just essentially paint over these extra areas. I don't want to try and dodge them out. What I'm trying to do is just get the text isolated, and then I can just jump out a bit further and just fill it with white. Don't have to be too careful. Option delete, because my foreground colour is white. Great. So that's done. So Command I to invert it. At this stage I can still have a look around, see if there's things I want to change. Just going to knock out that spot. Select it. Into my layers. A new layer. And then I'm going to choose a colour for it. Option delete. Control D. And I can move this into place. So let's have a look at a bit here. If I enlarge up, remember I can use the selection from other areas. So first of all, I'm going to get the landmass, so Command, click on that mask, and then again I can do things where with black, oops, I need to be up here, so layer, layer mask, reveal all, and now I'm cutting off some of that text where it goes across the landmass. So I'm going to keep it across that little one, but I'll take this bit off here, and maybe just put off the little island there, and maybe just a few other bits, this little bit here. Now, so you kind of, maybe I'll leave that little bit going over, but I'll take this bit out. So you're kind of getting it threading. So over the top in some places, and it sits behind in others. So this little bit here, make the brush a bit smaller, and I'll just knock out the top of that C. So there we go. So we get a bit of a mixture. The other thing as well is you can do a similar thing here. This time, instead of going to the mask, I'm actually going to command click on the map, because the map has transparency in the background. If I go back onto my mask with the lettering, I'm going to go Command H. What that does is it hides those outlines, but they're still active. Now when I come up here, I can paint some of those lines back over. Okay, so here maybe we'll have the lines over this bit, and maybe again just kind of over this bit. So again, weaving it in and out of this text. There's another interesting area here. Get a bit of detail coming in, and you can see that you can just have part of it. So kind of with a soft brush, you can kind of soften it in as well. And I'll do a little bit there on the edge. Okay, so a nice kind of interplay happening between the two. Now another option we can have here is I'm just going to select all, copy this image, go into the channels, and what I'm doing now is I'm just going to use a photo to gain a texture. I'll start it with white, command command delete to make it white, and command V. Just going to scale this up, and actually I can make it quite large, because really what I'm going for is just some kind of textural quality, and you'll see what I mean in a minute with this. So I'm just going to go Command L and blow it right out. So I'm just going for texture. So these areas through here, so it's almost becoming an abstraction. Some of these areas like this, I can just black them out. I can again use those tools like dodge and burn. I want to use them, but I'm just doing this a little bit crudely, darkening up areas that I want. And of course you can put stamp and other filters through it and all sorts of things. But with this, if I select it and I go to my layers, and let's have a look at this here. Command H, and what I can do if I really want to see it with the channels, I can just flick on the eye, and this will let me see it. If I double click on it, you can see here it says 50%. I can actually darken that up to, let's say, 85. so that you can really now see where this mask is going to sit across the text. So I like what's happening in this area down here. I can switch it off. Go to my layers. It's still there. If I go Command H, you can see it. And then on this, Option, Delete. I fill it with black. And again, you can see the way that image, just as a texture, is eating and biting into that text. There's some areas, like an area here, if I don't want it to be affected, just swap it around with a paintbrush, because we have transparency here, and just paint it back in. So you can control the way that works. Here is the layer options. So if I jump back into Photoshop, and now we look at this option here. What I've got is I've got this image on top, and I've got this underneath. Now, if I double click on this layer, you get a whole lot of options that pop up with the layer menu. And this thing here relates to the layer I'm on, and this one relates to the layer underneath. So just move it so you can see it a wee bit, what's happening. But if I bring the slider in, you're going to start to see the image coming through in the darker areas. So you can see it's starting to come through in the ocean first, and then the rest of it. If I move the other slider, it will come through in the lightest areas first. So it'll come through in the water, highlights of the water, and then the sand. You can see it coming through. And now it starts to come in. The opposite is at the darkest areas of the image underneath. If I move this slider, it will come through first. With this, the lightest areas of the image underneath show through first. Now the thing to be wary of here, if I come back here and I move the darker areas, if I enlarge up on it, what you're going to see is that there's a cutoff point. You can see it's quite pixelated, and that's because it comes along here and it gets to this point and then it stops. If we want to soften that transition, you can hold down the Option key and split it. Split that little triangle, and you can see now that it softens that transition a wee bit. So you can get something looking quite lovely and subtle. So we can see it kind of coming through, and let's push this down a bit. Really start to control the way it shows through that water a wee bit. Now the other thing as well is, like, this is working with the grey, but you can actually work with the colours as well. So if I put it on blue, you should see the difference when I move the slider. It starts to come through, but it comes through here and then it breaks into the sand quite quickly. If I change it to the red, it doesn't do that. It comes through in the waves a little bit more before it starts to break through in the sand. So different channels are going to have a different kind of response. Up here, we've got a multitude of things where we can switch on and off the red and green channels, blue and everything. So this is switching off the red and playing around with this kind of channel mixing. Now it's just the green of the top channel that kind of shows through, but you can end up with some really beautiful results from this as well, messing around with how these channels play out. All of this has an opacity, so we can modify that. We have all the blending. The next one I'm going to have a look at is layer masking. Now with this, if I jump through into this image, if I go to where the magic wand is, usually it comes up as object selection or the quick selection tool. If you're on there, you end up with these options across here: select subject and select and mask, and it's these two that I'm going to talk about now. Now select subject, if I just click it, usually it can do quite a good job of going through and analysing the image and deciding on what it is that I actually want to select, what the focus is. When you get little bits like this where it's not quite sure what to do, I change it to the paintbrush with the selection tool, so quick select, and if you hold down option, you can delete areas away. Sometimes it doesn't do it perfectly, so shift if we add it back on, and option to shift it off. Sometimes you have to go back and forth, even with different sized brushes, and what it's going to do is eventually it's going to work out what the edges that you're trying to collect. Goes too far, I eat back in with the option key. Eventually it's going to find that edge. The more you do it back and forth, the more it gets that selection right. So with this, I can hit the quick mask, but I'm going to go select and mask. I'm going to show you a variety of tools that we have in here. So when you get in here for the masking, you have various ways to view it. So we've got as an overlay on black on white, as a mask on the layers. So I'm going to go for on the layers. Now with something like the hair, it can be a good idea to switch on the smart radius and move this up a little bit. And it eats into the hair in a slightly different way. What you have to be careful of is, see, it's starting to pick at the shoulders, but it's usually given a kind of softer rendition. There's around here, there's lots of stuff here where if you smooth it, if I bump that right up, you'll see, should see what happens. Tries to smooth that selection a bit. There we go, it's just going slowly and thinking about it. Yeah, trying to smooth it out, the feather, the contrast. Now the thing I'm going to play with here is over on the left hand side you have some other options. So you have the quick selection tool where you can kind of add or delete to the mask as well. So I'll get a brush. So just going through and thinking about it. So that's kind of adding to it. Or if I hold down the option key, it's going to deselect a bit. It gets a bit rough and nasty because this is a fairly generalized tool. The next one here, we've got the refine edge brush. So if I get this, it's trying to select the edge. So this is usually where you use it around the hair, kind of soften. You can see it kind of eating into the hair, but it's trying to get these areas right. As a tool to play around with, you can get some quite interesting effects with it. We've still got things in here like the object selection tool. Which is going, is trying to take it back to that original selection. And we've got just a brush tool here, which is just your addition and subtraction. This one's a selection, this one's the actual brush. And so we'll go around and we'll see if we can refine that edge a bit again. Alright, so it's getting a little bit crazy, but it's a nice set of tools to play around with this. We'll go OK, and of course we're back into just making a selection. And where's my gradient? Okay, pop that behind. All of this stuff, once you make a layer mask, you can always go in and edit things. So bits like this, I can come in, and as long as you're working with a normal paintbrush, black and white, we know that black blocks. I can put this down a bit. I usually have 85, gives a soft edge to the brush, which is quite good for going around surfaces like clothing. Just a little bit of softening, not completely hard. So if we look at these areas around the arm, can actually just come back in with the paintbrush and knock them out and tidy areas up. Of course, you can always switch it around if you make a mistake and bring it back out, back to black, and go back to tidying up the edges. So that's just the normal way that you can kind of utilize the paintbrush on a mask. Back into Photoshop, and we'll use this image that we've got here. But here's an image here, and as long as it's, in this case, it's black and white, I'm just going to D. The D key makes this pure black and white. X, every time you hit it, swaps them around. So I'm just going to paint out some of these areas, because the area that I want to retain as a brush is this little corner down here. This looks like it could make an interesting brush, so I'm going to see if I can pull a bit of that out. We can select it if we want, but there's nothing else on this page, so we can just go edit, define brush preset. Alright, and you can see we've got our brush now there with us. Now, as you draw with it, it's a very regular pattern. I'll undo that. So whenever you make a brush, the area you want to play around with is the brush settings panel. And the main thing that you'll see here is the shape dynamics. That's what I like to play with. So you see that, and there's the jitter size. You can see the way that it's kind of grouping little bits together and spreading others. The main thing I like here is the is the angle, to be able to change that. The scattering, the count, how much is going to kind of get added in there. Shape dynamics, let's see if we can add anything else. We'll just go with that and see what happens. So now close those brush settings. Probably what I need to do is make that brush a little bit smaller in size, and I'm going to swap it around, make it white. You can see the way it's kind of painting this area out, so it starts to get more of a natural brush look to it. Now this one, what I want to notice with this is the other option you can do is you can actually go on with something like the magic wand tool, click in here, and I might leave it as that. It's pretty much got everything, and I'll go edit, define brush. Now if I come back in here, and actually I'm going to enlarge it up a bit, and I'll give it a colour so that you can see what's happening with this. When I click it, you can see that it's actually keeping some of the grayscale that we had in that image. So if I click it once, we end up with that, and let's go another colour, and I'm just going to reduce it down a bit, and we'll go back into those shape dynamics with this one. So the angle, we can see it changing down here, the scattering. So this is making a bit more of an interesting brush. There's all sorts of things down here. The noise, wet edges, there's all sorts of things that you can start to play with. So we'll try noise as well. That's the way that it starts to play in. We can put this on. Oh, actually, it's just on the one layer, so we need to make another layer if we're going to build it up and start to use something like multiply or some of the other functionality that comes with this. If we come back into the fill in flash, this image as well, we can use it as a mask. So I'm black, I'm on the mask, and you can see the way it's kind of eating into that image. Because of the grayscale, you can get some quite nice effects happening with it.